There is a particular kind of quiet that exists only in the hours after midnight. Not silence, exactly, because the world is never truly silent. There is always something moving, something breathing, something turning. But this hour, this specific hour when the day has completely surrendered and the next one hasn't quite arrived yet, this is the hour that belongs to the body. Not to the phone, not to the inbox, not to the demands and the noise and the relentless forward motion of modern life. This hour belongs to something ancient, something deeply wired into every cell you carry, something that was running long before the first city rose and long before the first clock was ever built. Welcome to the After Dark series. Tonight, we are going to do something a little different. We are not going to rush. We are not going to skim the surface of this topic and move on. Tonight, we are going to go deep. We are going to descend slowly and deliberately into the biology of sleep, into the hidden machinery of the night, into the quiet, industrious, extraordinary work that your body is designed to do in the dark. Tonight's masterclass is called the Circadian Code, and it is, without question, the most important thing you will ever learn. And about us all, there. My B want you to get comfortable. Wherever you are right now, or whatever position you're in, let your body settle, let your breath slow down, and just listen. Because what we are about to explore together is the difference between a body that is healing itself and a body that is slowly, quietly breaking down. And for those of us who have crossed the threshold of 50, that difference is not academic. It is not theoretical. It is the difference between waking up tomorrow feeling restored or waking up feeling like you've been running on fumes for the last decade. Let's begin at the beginning. Let's begin with a clock. Chapter 1. The Circadian Code, the master clock, and the signal that fades deep inside your brain, tucked just behind your eyes, no larger than a grain of rice, sits one of the most sophisticated timing mechanisms ever discovered in the natural world. It is called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, the SCN. Say it slowly, suprachiasmatic nucleus. You will not find this structure if you open most health books. You will not hear about it from the vast majority of doctors you visit. And yet, this tiny cluster of roughly 20,000 neurons, this almost imperceptibly small piece of your hypothalamus, is right now running your entire life. The SCN is your master clock, every second of every hour of every day. This structure is broadcasting a signal, a timing signal, a quiet, continuous pulse that travels from your brain outward through your nervous system, through your hormones, through the very molecular machinery inside each of your 37 trillion cells. And each one of those cells has its own internal clock, its own cycling machinery that is listening for that signal the way a musician in an orchestra listens for the conductor. The SCN tells your liver when to activate its fat-burning enzymes. It tells your pancreas when to release insulin and when to hold back. It tells your adrenal glands when to flood your bloodstream with cortisol, that energizing, wake-promoting hormone that is supposed to peak sharply in the early morning and then gently fade through the day like a tide going out. It tells your pineal gland when to release melatonin into the darkness, that extraordinary hormone that is not simply a sleep signal, but one of the most powerful antioxidants the human body produces. It tells your immune system when to run its overnight maintenance checks. And yes, it tells your brain when to initiate its own remarkable cleaning process, the nightly washing away of the metabolic debris that your neurons have been accumulating since the moment you opened your eyes this morning. The SCN is not doing one thing. It is orchestrating everything, all at once, in perfect sequence, in perfect timing, every single night, or at least it is supposed to, because here is where the story takes its turn. Research published in the Journal of Biological Rhythms in 2024, representing the most comprehensive review of SCN function in 50 years, has illuminated something that the scientific community had been circling for decades. The SCN ages, not metaphorically, not simply in the way that all things slowly deteriorate over time. The SCN undergoes real, measurable, structural and functional changes as we grow older, and those changes accelerate in the years after 50. The specific neuropeptides that keep the SCN's internal network of neurons synchronized. Arginine vasopressin, vasoactive intestinal peptide, gastrin-releasing peptide, these signaling molecules, which function essentially as the internal communication system of the master clock itself, begin to decline in both their concentration and their rhythmic expression. Research tracking the SCN in aging populations has found that the loss of neurons expressing vasoactive intestinal peptide is directly correlated with a reduction in the amplitude of behavioral circadian rhythms. In other words, as these key messenger molecules fade, the signal from the master clock gets quieter, weaker, less precise. The amplitude of the circadian timing signal, that strong, clear wave of biological information that keeps your body synchronized, can diminish significantly with age. And when the conductor loses the precision of the baton, the orchestra drifts. Your cortisol, instead of rising in that sharp, powerful surge in the morning that sets the tone for the entire day, begins to flatten. Studies examining the cortisol awakening response in older adults have found that it is significantly blunted compared to younger adults. That crisp morning peak, that biochemical signal that was supposed to sharpen your cognition, mobilize your energy stores, calibrate your immune response, and synchronize your peripheral clocks, becomes a low, diffuse plateau. It lingers into the evening when it should be gone. It fails to fire properly in the morning when you need it most. And so you find yourself in that strange, frustrating limbo that so many people over 50 know intimately. Wired at 10 at night, exhausted at 10 in the morning, your body's peripheral clocks, the clocks running inside your liver, your heart, your gut, your muscles, begin to drift out of synchrony with each other and with the central master. Researchers have named this condition circadian desynchrony, and it is not a minor inconvenience. It is a systems-level disorder. Your liver thinks it's one time. Your brain thinks it's another. Your metabolism is receiving conflicting instructions from multiple clocks that have lost their coordination. The result is not one specific symptom you can point to. The result is a pervasive systemic degradation of function that touches everything: energy, cognition, metabolism, immunity, repair, recovery. And yet, almost no one talks about this. Almost no one is telling you that the fatigue you feel, the brain fog that won't quite lift, the extra weight that seems to appear regardless of what you eat, the sleep that never quite restores, might have a single, elegant, biological explanation at its root. The clock is drifting, and we can bring it back. But first, we have to understand precisely how the clock is supposed to receive its instructions. Because the master clock, for all its extraordinary sophistication, relies on input from the outside world. It is not a closed system. It listens, and the primary language it listens in is light. The light system, melanopsin, and the eyes. The scientists almost missed for most of human history. We understood the eye to serve one fundamental purpose: to see. Rods for low-light vision, cones for color. The image forms on the retina, travels through the optic nerve, reaches the visual cortex, and the world assembles itself in your mind. That was the story. That was the complete account of what your eyes were doing. And then, in 2002, researchers David Burson and colleagues at Brown University discovered something that required a complete rewriting of that story. Buried in the innermost layer of the retina, not in the rods and cones at the back, but in the ganglion cell layer near the front, is a third class of photoreceptor. These cells are called intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cells, and they express a photopigment called melanopsin, a protein that is maximally sensitive not to green light or red light, but to short wavelength blue light, peaking at roughly 480 nanometers. These cells, which constitute somewhere between 1 and 2% of all retinal ganglion cells, do not help you see shapes. They do not help you read. They do not contribute to your visual image of the world in any conventional sense. Their function is entirely non-visual. Their sole purpose is to tell your suprachiasmatic nucleus what time it is. When sufficient light in that blue wavelength range strikes these melanopsin-containing cells, they fire. They send a signal down a dedicated pathway called the retinohypothalamic tract, directly to the SCN. And the SCN responds immediately. It suppresses melatonin production, it activates the cortisol cascade. It resets its internal timing to register. Daytime has arrived. This system is elegant, ancient, and extraordinarily precise. It is a biological design that was calibrated for a world where the light signal was unambiguous. The sun rose. It was bright, enormously bright compared to anything artificial. And it was spectrally rich with the very wavelengths that the melanopsin system is designed to detect. The body received its morning signal with absolute clarity. The master clock set itself. The day's hormonal architecture was laid down perfectly. And 12 hours later, the sun set, the darkness came, and melatonin rose, unopposed, to guide the body into its nightly repair. That was the design. And then we invented electricity, and the smartphone, and the 60-inch television mounted on the bedroom wall, and the LED lighting that bathes every room in our homes in a spectrum that the melanopsin system reads as noon. Here is the trap that most people are living inside without ever realizing it. During the day, we spend most of our time indoors, under artificial lighting that, while it seems bright enough to us, typically delivers somewhere between 100 and 500 lux to the eye. On an overcast day outside, you are receiving 10,000 lux. On a clear, sunny day, you can exceed 100,000 lux. The melanopsin system, especially as it ages and becomes less sensitive, needs that intensity of signal to set the clock properly. Office lighting simply does not provide it. The morning signal that should be setting the rhythm of your entire day is arriving as a whisper when it needs to arrive as a shout. And then the evening comes, and instead of the gradual dimming and reddening of sunset, instead of the gentle spectral shift that has always told the body that darkness is approaching, and it is time to begin the melatonin cascade. You pick up your phone, you turn on your television, you sit under the bright LED lighting of your kitchen, and all of those light sources are delivering precisely the wavelengths that the melanopsin cells are most sensitive to. The blue light, the signal that says the sun is still up. Do not release melatonin. The day is not over. Research published in the Journal of Pineal Research in 2024 by Najjar and colleagues revealed something particularly important for those of us over 50. In young adults, melatonin suppression by evening light is driven almost entirely by the melanopsin system. But in older adults, the process becomes more complex, involving additional photoreceptor pathways, and the overall system shows altered dynamics. The aging eye, with its gradually yellowing lens that preferentially absorbs short wavelength light, is receiving a compromised version of both signals. The daytime signal that should be robustly setting the morning clock is already attenuated, and the evening screen light, even at lower absolute intensities, can still significantly suppress melatonin production because the aging system's thresholds and sensitivities have shifted. The result is a circadian system receiving weak, confused, contradictory signals, a daytime that never fully registers as day, an evening that never fully registers as night, and a master clock that is trying to orchestrate the most complex biological symphony in existence, while someone is playing static through its speakers. But here is something important that Jordan Blake explores in depth in his work on longevity and biological design. The concept that the body is not passively deteriorating. It is responding. It is adapting. And when we understand the design clearly enough, we can work with it rather than against it. The morning anchor. How to give your clock back its voice. The single most powerful intervention available to anyone who wants to repair their circadian system is morning light. Not a lamp, not an indoor light source, outdoor light. Within 30 minutes of waking, ideally as close to the moment of first light as your life allows, you need to take your eyes outside and expose them to the sky. Not to the direct disk of the sun, which can damage the retina, but to the open sky, the ambient light of the morning. Even on a heavily overcast day, this exposure will deliver 10 to 20 times more melanopsin-activating photons to your retina than any indoor lighting can provide. 10 to 15 minutes. That is all it takes to fire the system. What happens in those minutes is profound. The melanopsin cells in your retina register the light. They send their signal down the retinohypothalamic tract to the SCN. The SCN responds by doing two things simultaneously. First, it sets an internal timer for your melatonin release. Your brain will begin releasing melatonin roughly 12 to 16 hours after that first morning light exposure. The melatonin onset, the beginning of your biological night, is literally programmed by the timing of your morning light. If you miss the morning signal, if you stay indoors all morning behind windows and artificial light, your melatonin timer never properly starts. Your evening melatonin rise is delayed, diminished, and fragmented. Second, the morning light exposure triggers a robust cortisol awakening response. It sharpens the hormonal peak that should be setting the metabolic tone for your day. It tells every peripheral clock in your body, the day has begun. Synchronize now. The liver starts its fat-processing enzymes. The gut begins its motility programs. The immune system shifts from its overnight repair mode to its daytime surveillance mode. For those of us over 50, this is not optional information. It is foundational. Because the SCN in the aging brain has become less sensitive to entrainment, less responsive to the Zeitgebers, which is the German word that researchers use for the external timing cues that keep us synchronized with the world. This term, which translates roughly as time givers, encompasses light, temperature, meal timing, and physical activity. But light is the dominant signal, by a considerable margin. The weaker the SCN's intrinsic sensitivity, the more important it becomes to deliver a clear, unambiguous, high amplitude signal. Think of it this way. If you are trying to have a conversation with someone in a room where the acoustics have degraded, you speak more clearly, more deliberately, more loudly. The SCN over 50 needs the same consideration. Not because it has failed, but because its sensitivity has shifted, and we need to meet it where it is. The morning anchor is not a supplement. It is not a protocol that requires equipment or expense. It is the most ancient biological intervention in existence. You step outside, you face the sky, you let the light do what it has always been designed to do. And in that simple act, you hand the conductor back his baton. There is one more element to the light equation that deserves its own moment: the evening architecture of light. Just as the morning signal needs to be strong and clearly timed, the evening light environment needs to be protected. This does not mean sitting in complete darkness from sunset. What it means is transitioning your light environment in the 90 to 120 minutes before you intend to sleep. Dimming overhead lights, switching from cool white LEDs to warmer, amber-toned bulbs or salt lamps. Setting your screens to their maximum warm light settings, or better yet, putting them away entirely. Allowing your environment to begin mirroring what the natural world has always provided in the evening hours. A gradual dimming, a warming of tone, a gentle signal to the melanopsin cells that the day is closing. When you do this consistently, when you give your SCN the clear morning signal it needs and protect it from the false evening signals that have been confusing it for years, you are not simply improving your sleep. You are fundamentally rebuilding the foundation upon which every aspect of your metabolic health is built. And the first wall of that foundation is light. Let's move now into the darkness itself. Let's move into what happens inside your brain in the hours after your head touches the pillow, and why those hours may be the most important hours of your entire day. Chapter 2. The glymphatic system. Your brain's midnight dishwasher for decades. One of the most puzzling questions in all of neuroscience was this: how does the brain clean itself? Every other organ in the body has a dedicated waste management system. The lymphatic network, that vast web of vessels running alongside your blood vessels, collects the metabolic debris, the cellular waste products, the misfolded proteins, the immune cells that have done their work and need to be cleared away, and carries them out of the tissues through lymph nodes and eventually back into circulation for processing and disposal. The brain has none of that, or so it was thought. The brain was considered uniquely isolated, sealed behind the blood-brain barrier, running its 3 watts of constant power, a metabolic rate that is extraordinary relative to its size, generating an enormous quantity of waste products, of spent neurotransmitters, of metabolic byproducts, of proteins that have been misfolded in the normal course of neural activity, and apparently having no way to clear them. This apparent paradox sat unresolved for years. And then, in 2012, a neuroscientist named Micah Nadergaard and her team at the University of Rochester published a paper in the journal Science that fundamentally changed our understanding of the brain. They discovered the glymphatic system. The name is a combination of glial and lymphatic, because the system they discovered uses the brain's glial cells, specifically a type called astrocytes, to do the work that lymphatic vessels do everywhere else in the body. And the mechanism by which it works is something that, when you truly understand it, will forever change the way you think about sleep. Here is what happens. Astrocytes are the support cells of the brain. They surround and support neurons. And each astrocyte extends long, arm-like processes that wrap around the blood vessels that run through brain tissue. At the ends of these processes are structures called end feet and embedded. In those end feet are special water channels called aquaporin 4 or AQP4. These water channels are the gates through which cerebrospinal fluid can be pulled into the brain parenchyma. During wakefulness, these channels are largely inactive. The cerebrospinal fluid that bathes the outside of the brain circulates in the subarachnoid space and the ventricular system. Some exchange occurs, but it is slow. The interstitial space, the fluid-filled gaps between neurons and glial cells, is relatively tight, compressed. But when you enter deep sleep, something remarkable happens. The neurons of the sleeping brain begin to fire in a synchronized, slow pattern. These are the slow waves of NREM sleep, the deep, slow-wave oscillations that define the third stage of non-REM sleep. And research published in Cell in January of 2025 revealed a crucial piece of the mechanism that nobody had clearly seen before. During NREM sleep, there are tightly synchronized oscillations in norepinephrine levels, cerebral blood volume, and cerebrospinal fluid flow. Norepinephrine, the same neurotransmitter released by the locus coeruleus that keeps you alert during the day, drops and then briefly pulses during deep sleep in a rhythmic pattern. Each norepinephrine drop causes a dilation of cerebral blood vessels. The blood volume in the brain briefly increases, and then, as the blood volume shifts back, cerebrospinal fluid is pulled inward in a wave. These CSF waves, driven by the rhythmic vasomotion of deep sleep, are the engine of glymphatic clearance. The science published in Science back in 2013 by Nedergaard's group showed something almost impossible to believe. During deep sleep, the brain cells, the neurons themselves, actually shrink. The interstitial space between neurons increases by approximately 60% compared to wakefulness. 60%. The channels widen, the gaps open, and cerebrospinal fluid rushes through this suddenly expanded space like water through a floodgate, sweeping up the waste products that have been accumulating in the interstitial space throughout the day of waking activity. This cerebrospinal fluid carries those waste products out through the venous drainage pathways and from there to the meningeal lymphatics, the recently discovered lymphatic vessels that line the meninges of the brain and drain directly into the cervical lymph nodes, and from there to the bloodstream, where the waste can be processed by the liver and kidneys and eliminated from the body. What kinds of waste are we talking about? The most important ones, in the context of brain health and aging, are amyloid beta and tau, the proteins whose accumulation in the brain is the defining pathological hallmark of Alzheimer's disease. Amyloid beta is a normal byproduct of neuronal activity. Every time your neurons fire, every thought, every memory, every moment of perception and attention, amyloid beta is being produced in small quantities. In a healthy, well-sleeping brain, the glymphatic system clears this protein continuously during sleep. The levels never build to dangerous concentrations. The system stays ahead of the production. But in 2025, researchers publishing in Nature Communications conducted the first rigorous clinical trial in humans that directly measured glymphatic clearance. In a randomized crossover study with 39 participants, they found that glymphatic clearance during normal sleep increased morning plasma levels of Alzheimer's biomarkers, meaning the proteins were being actively moved out of the brain and into the bloodstream for disposal. When those same participants were sleep-deprived, the clearance process was significantly impaired. The researchers measured something called brain parenchymal resistance. a direct index of how freely cerebrospinal fluid is flowing through the brain tissue. During normal sleep, this resistance dropped, allowing robust CSF flow. During sleep deprivation, it remained elevated. The dishwasher, to use a simpler image, stayed in its locked, closed position. The kitchen filled with dirty dishes that had nowhere to go. And there is a further layer of darkness here that the research on aging has revealed. In old mice, research has found that glymphatic activity is reduced by as much as 80 to 90% compared to young mice. The AQP4 water channels that drive CSF flow through the brain tissue become less polarized with age, meaning they are no longer concentrated in the astrocyte end feet where they need to be, but distributed more diffusely throughout the cell. The arterial pulsations that help drive the CSF waves become less robust. The efficiency of the entire system degrades. Amyloid beta accumulation, which impairs fluid movement within the interstitial space, creates what researchers have described as a positive feedback loop, where the accumulated waste that wasn't cleared actually makes it harder for future clearance to occur. This is the mechanism by which sleep deprivation and poor sleep quality, accumulated over years and decades, can contribute to neurodegeneration. Not through one dramatic night, not through one missed sleep cycle, but through the slow, patient, relentless accumulation of waste that was never washed away. There is something else the research suggests that is within your control tonight. Sleep position matters. A 2015 study from Stony Brook University, published in the Journal of Neuroscience, examined glymphatic transport efficiency in different body positions. The lateral position, sleeping on your side, was associated with more efficient clearance of amyloid beta and other waste products compared to the supine position, on your back, or the prone position, face down. The researchers noted that the lateral position may optimize the geometry of the paravascular channels that the cerebrospinal fluid flows through, allowing gravity and the whole architecture of the glymphatic pathway to work in concert rather than against each other. If you are a habitual back sleeper who struggles with morning brain fog, this simple positional change may be worth experimenting with. Not because sleeping on your side is a cure, but because the biology of the glymphatic system appears to be designed to function optimally in that orientation. The deeper implication of all of this, and this is where Jordan Blake spends considerable time in his exploration of biological design and longevity, is that the brain's capacity for self-renewal is not fixed. It is not simply a function of age, it is a function of sleep quality, sleep depth, and the conditions you create for the glymphatic system to do its work. Deep, uninterrupted, slow-wave sleep is not passive rest. It is the most metabolically important event that occurs in your brain every night. It is the process by which your most precious organ cleans itself, processes its memories, repairs its synaptic connections, and sets itself up for another day of extraordinary function. When that process is disrupted, as it is in the vast majority of adults over 50 who are living with fragmented, light, insufficient sleep, the cost is not immediately visible. It doesn't announce itself. It accumulates quietly, protein by protein, night by night. The question is not whether the glymphatic system is working in your brain. The question is whether you are giving it the conditions it needs to work well. And those conditions begin with the previous chapter, with light, with circadian alignment, with setting the stage so that when sleep comes, it is deep enough and sustained enough to allow the dishwasher to run its full cycle. Chapter 3: Sleep and Insulin Resistance, the night your metabolism breaks. Let's talk about something that most people in the health and fitness space are not connecting clearly enough. You can eat perfectly. You can count every calorie, track every macro, prepare every meal with discipline and care. You can exercise 5 days a week. You can take the supplements. You can follow the protocols. And if you are not sleeping well, you are swimming against a current that the research suggests is almost impossible to overcome. Because what happens to your metabolism in a single night of poor sleep is not a minor inconvenience. It is a fundamental disruption of the hormonal and biochemical architecture that controls how your body handles fuel. Let me give you the science, and let me give it to you plainly. A study published in the Journal of Clinical Endocrinology and Metabolism examined what happens when healthy subjects sleep for only 4 hours on a single night. Just one night. These were not chronically sleep-deprived people. These were healthy individuals who, on one occasion, received a restricted sleep opportunity. The next day, they were assessed using a technique called the hyperinsulinemic euglycemic clamp, the gold standard measure of insulin sensitivity. The results were striking. A single night of partial sleep deprivation induced insulin resistance in multiple metabolic pathways simultaneously. Hepatic insulin resistance, meaning the liver was no longer properly responding to insulin's signal to stop producing glucose. Peripheral insulin resistance, meaning the muscles were no longer efficiently taking up glucose from the bloodstream. And the rate of glucose disposal during the clamp was decreased by approximately 25% compared to the unrestricted night. 25% after one night. Van Couter's research group at the University of Chicago, which has done much of the foundational work on this topic, found that sleep debt conditions produce 30 to 40% reductions in glucose tolerance. A separate study from Columbia University showed that reducing sleep by just 90 minutes per night, consistently, over 6 weeks impaired insulin sensitivity in women independent of any changes in body fat. The metabolic damage was occurring at the cellular level, not as a consequence of weight gain, but as a direct result of the hormonal disruption that sleep restriction creates. What is the mechanism? It is multifactorial, but the core story involves cortisol. When sleep is disrupted or restricted, particularly when the deep, slow-wave phases of sleep are abbreviated, cortisol levels remain elevated into the following day. Cortisol is a glucocorticoid. It promotes glucose production by the liver, and it actively counteracts insulin's effects in peripheral tissues. The muscles, under the influence of elevated cortisol, become less responsive to insulin's instruction to take up glucose. The liver, similarly influenced, increases its output of glucose into the bloodstream. And the pancreas, sensing elevated blood glucose and insulin resistance, compensates by producing more insulin, which eventually exhausts beta cells and drives a progressively worsening cycle. But cortisol is not the only player. Enter the hunger hormones, two of the most underappreciated hormones in all of metabolic medicine. The first is ghrelin, often called the hunger hormone. Ghrelin is produced primarily in the stomach. It rises before meals to signal appetite. It promotes hunger. It stimulates the drive to seek and consume food. And research published in PLOS Medicine found that people with shorter sleep duration had measurably elevated ghrelin levels. A study specifically examining the effects of a single night of total sleep deprivation found plasma ghrelin levels elevated by approximately 22% the following morning, with subjects reporting markedly stronger feelings of hunger. The second is leptin, the satiety hormone. Leptin is produced by fat cells. It signals to the hypothalamus that energy stores are adequate and appetite should be suppressed. It is the biological mechanism by which your body knows when it has had enough to eat. And sleep restriction consistently reduces leptin levels. In the landmark Van Korter study comparing 2 nights of 4-hour sleep versus 2 nights of 10-hour sleep, leptin levels fell significantly during the restricted condition, while ghrelin rose. The result of these simultaneous hormonal shifts is not subtle. You wake up from a poor night's sleep with a biochemical profile that is driving you powerfully, biologically, irresistibly, toward calorie-dense, carbohydrate-rich food. You are not weak-willed. You are not undisciplined. You are responding to a legitimate hormonal signal that is every bit as compelling as the signal that tells you to drink water when you are dehydrated. Your brain's reward system is being activated specifically for sugar and refined carbohydrates, the fastest sources of glucose, because your body has spent the night burning through its glucose stores without properly restoring itself, and it is now in a mild state of metabolic panic. And for those over 50, this dynamic is amplified in a particularly insidious way. Age-related changes in sleep architecture mean that the proportion of time spent in deep, restorative slow-wave sleep declines significantly across the adult lifespan. Research has consistently documented that deep sleep, stage N3, the stage characterized by the large, slow delta waves that drive glymphatic clearance and optimize insulin sensitivity, begins to diminish in the 4th decade and continues declining through the 5th, 6th, and beyond. The sleep a 55-year-old gets is architecturally different from the sleep a 25-year-old gets, even if the total duration is similar. It is lighter, more fragmented, containing less of the deep phase that matters most metabolically. This means that the same number of hours in bed may be delivering significantly less of the biological repair that the body needs. And the cumulative metabolic consequence of years of architecturally shallow sleep is not trivial. It is thought to be a meaningful contributor to the elevated rates of type 2 diabetes, metabolic syndrome, and visceral fat accumulation that characterize the post-50 demographic. There is one more layer to this story that I want to make sure is absolutely clear. Sleep deprivation does not just affect the hormones that regulate hunger. It affects the hormones that regulate fat storage directly. Insulin, which rises in response to the impaired glucose tolerance of sleep-deprived cells, is the primary driver of fat storage in adipose tissue. When insulin is elevated, fat burning is biochemically suppressed. The fat cells lock up. Lipolysis, the process by which stored fat is broken down and released into circulation for use as fuel, is actively inhibited by the presence of insulin. This means that a night of poor sleep does not merely make you hungrier and less able to resist food. The next day, it actively creates a hormonal environment in which burning stored fat becomes biochemically difficult, regardless of what you eat. Jordan Blake's central argument in his work on biological design is that we are too often treating symptoms while the underlying system failures go unaddressed. You can take every fat-burning supplement on the market. You can run every morning. You can track your calories with obsessive precision. And if the circadian system is broken, if sleep is poor, if insulin remains chronically elevated from sleep-driven metabolic disruption, you are treating the downstream effects while the upstream cause continues, unaddressed. Sleep is not rest. Sleep is metabolic medicine. And for those of us over 50, it may be the most powerful metabolic medicine available. Chapter 4. The temperature lever, your body's most elegant sleep switch. Close your eyes for a moment and think about the last time you fell asleep easily, really easily. The kind of sleep onset that felt effortless, where you lay down and within minutes the world simply dissolved. Chances are you were comfortably cool, not cold, but cool enough that you pulled the covers in slightly, that slight pleasurable warmth enveloping you as your body settled. That experience is not accidental. It is not simply comfort. It is the result of one of the most precisely engineered biological transitions in the human body. A transition that has everything to do with temperature and that becomes critically important to understand as we age. Your core body temperature is not constant. Most people understand that we maintain an average temperature of around 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit or 37 degrees Celsius. But what most people do not realize is that this is an average across time. And the variation around that average over the course of a 24-hour period is tightly controlled, biologically significant, and intimately linked to the circadian system and to sleep. In the late afternoon and early evening, your core body temperature begins a descent. This descent is orchestrated, as nearly everything is in this story, by the suprachiasmatic nucleus. The SCN sends signals to the preoptic area of the hypothalamus, the brain's primary thermoregulatory center, initiating a process called vasodilation in the peripheral blood vessels of the skin, particularly in the hands and feet. Blood flow to the extremities increases. Heat from the body's core is redistributed to the surface. The hands and feet warm up as the core cools down. And this gradient, the difference between the warm periphery and the cooling core, is one of the most reliable biological predictors of imminent sleep onset that we know of. Research has shown that when the temperature gradient between the extremities and the core reaches a specific point, when enough heat has been shed from the body's center to the periphery and from there to the environment, sleep. Initiation occurs almost automatically. You don't decide to fall asleep. You fall asleep because the thermoregulatory machinery has completed its preparatory sequence. The lowest core body temperature of the night, which typically falls by somewhere between 1 and 2 degrees Fahrenheit from its daytime peak, occurs approximately 2 hours after sleep onset. This cooling is not simply a consequence of lying still. It is an active, driven process. The slow wave phases of NREM sleep are associated with further reductions in both core temperature and brain temperature. The brain, in deep sleep, is literally cooler than it is during wakefulness. And this cooling appears to be necessary for the glymphatic clearance mechanism we discussed in the previous chapter to operate optimally. When the sleeping environment is too warm, when your body cannot complete this cooling process, the downstream consequences are significant. Research published in the journal Environmental Health and Wellness, preventive medicine has shown that elevated ambient temperature reduces both total sleep time and the proportion of time spent in slow wave and REM sleep. The body, rather than proceeding through its normal architecture of sleep stages, becomes diverted into continuous, low-level thermoregulatory effort, trying to stay cool, shifting position, partially awakening without fully waking. The restorative stages of sleep are abbreviated. The night passes, but the repair doesn't happen. The consensus from sleep medicine research is that the optimal bedroom temperature for most adults falls in the range of 60 to 67 degrees Fahrenheit, between 15.5 and 19.4 degrees Celsius. For adults over 65, slightly warmer is often appropriate because the peripheral vasodilation response that drives the cooling process can become less robust with age. But for those in the 50 to 65 range, the cooler end of that range is generally associated with better slow-wave sleep depth and duration. Now, here is the part of this chapter that people find counterintuitive, and it is beautiful in its elegance. One of the most effective ways to cool your core body temperature before bed is to warm your body externally about 90 minutes before sleep. A hot shower, a warm bath, time in a sauna, even soaking the feet in warm water. When you expose your skin to external warmth, your blood vessels dilate in response. Blood rushes to the surface, and when you then step out of the shower or the bath and into a cooler environment, that heat radiates off your skin rapidly. The vasodilation that was responding to the external warmth now facilitates an accelerated loss of core heat to the environment. Your core temperature drops more steeply and more rapidly than it would have without the warm exposure. It is a paradox only on the surface. Warm the outside to cool the inside. And that interior cooling, that accelerated descent of core temperature, is exactly what the SCN interprets as a powerful sleep onset signal. Melatonin and temperature are also linked in a beautiful loop. The release of melatonin from the pineal gland in the evening actively promotes peripheral vasodilation, helping to drive the heat redistribution from core to skin. And the resulting drop in core temperature, in turn, reinforces the melatonin signal. The two systems amplify each other. They are designed to work together, which is why anything that disrupts one also disrupts the other. The suppression of melatonin by evening blue light that we discussed in the first chapter doesn't just delay sleep biochemically, it disrupts the thermoregulatory cascade that melatonin is partly driving. The result is that the normal evening core temperature decline is blunted. The body stays warmer, longer. The sleep onset signal is weaker. And the transition into deep, restorative sleep is delayed and diminished. For those over 50, this matters even more, because the peripheral vasodilation response, the biological mechanism by which heat is driven from the core to the surface of the hands and feet, can become less efficient with age. Blood vessel responsiveness changes. The autonomic signals that drive vasodilation may be less robust. Some older adults struggle with this process and find themselves lying awake in what should be a cool, sleep-promoting environment, simply unable to initiate the cooling cascade. The practical applications here are layered and interacting. Protect the evening light environment to allow melatonin to rise and begin its role in initiating the cooling cascade. Use a warm shower or bath 90 minutes before bed to accelerate the core cooling process. Set the bedroom to that 60 to 67 degree range. Choose bedding that allows for heat dissipation rather than heat trapping. And consider one further thing that the research consistently highlights. Socks. Warm, breathable socks worn to bed have been shown in multiple studies to reduce sleep onset latency, the time it takes to fall asleep. This seems counterintuitive given everything we have just said about cooling, but the mechanism is actually consistent with it. Wearing breathable socks promotes vasodilation in the feet, opening up the peripheral vessels, allowing heat from the core to flow more efficiently out through the extremities and into the cooler environment. The feet warm up, the core cools down, and the temperature gradient that triggers sleep onset is achieved more quickly. Your body knows how to fall asleep. It has been designed with extraordinary precision to do exactly this. Our job is not to force it. Our job is to create the conditions in which the design can express itself. Temperature is one of the most powerful of those conditions. and it costs nothing to optimize. Chapter 5: The Supplement Stack. Intelligent biochemical support for the aging sleep system. There is a particular kind of wisdom that comes from understanding a system deeply enough to know where and how to support it. And equally importantly, where not to interfere. Everything we have covered in this masterclass so far has been about the biology, the master clock, and how it receives its light signals, the glymphatic system and its dependence on deep, slow-wave sleep, the metabolic cascade that a single night of poor sleep sets in motion, the thermoregulatory mechanism that transitions the body from wakefulness to rest. Each of these systems has been working in your body since before you were born. They do not need to be replaced or overridden. They need to be supported, particularly as the aging process subtly alters their efficiency. This is the philosophy behind what I would call the intelligent sleep stack. Not a collection of sedatives, not a pharmaceutical intervention that forces unconsciousness by chemically overriding your nervous system. A set of carefully chosen compounds that work at the edges of these biological systems, nudging, supporting, lubricating, helping the body do more completely what it is already designed to do. Let's go through each component with the care and precision it deserves. Magnesium L-threonate. Magnesium is involved in over 300 enzymatic reactions in the human body, and among its many roles, 2 are particularly relevant to sleep and brain health. First, magnesium is an essential cofactor for the production of GABA, gamma-aminobutyric acid, the brain's primary inhibitory neurotransmitter. GABA is the molecular brakes. When GABA binds to its receptors in the brain, it reduces neuronal excitability. It quiets the firing. It creates the biochemical environment in which the transition from wakefulness to sleep can occur. It is, in a very real sense, the neurological foundation of rest. Second, magnesium plays a crucial role in regulating the NMDA receptor, the primary glutamate receptor in the brain. Glutamate is the brain's primary excitatory neurotransmitter, the accelerator. Under normal conditions, magnesium sits in the NMDA receptor channel and blocks it when the neuron is at rest, preventing excessive excitatory signaling. When magnesium levels in the brain are insufficient, this blocking function is impaired. The brain runs hotter, more excitatory. The quiet needed for sleep onset and for the sustained oscillations of deep sleep becomes harder to achieve. Here is the problem with standard magnesium supplementation for brain-targeted applications. Most magnesium supplements, magnesium oxide, magnesium citrate, magnesium glycinate, are absorbed well in the gut but cross the blood-brain barrier poorly. They raise systemic magnesium levels but do not significantly increase magnesium concentration in the brain itself. The brain has its own tightly regulated transport systems for controlling what crosses into it, and magnesium transport into the nervous system is limited. Magnesium L-threonate is different. The L-threonate molecule acts as a carrier that dramatically enhances magnesium transport across the blood-brain barrier. A 2022 study published in Nutrients found that magnesium L-threonate supplementation increased brain magnesium levels by approximately 15% over a 24-day period. A randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled clinical trial published in Sleep Medicine X in August of 2024 investigated magnesium L-threonate in adults with self-reported sleep problems. The results showed that the supplement improved sleep quality, specifically enhancing deep sleep and REM sleep stages, and also improved daytime mood, energy, alertness, and productivity. These findings are consistent with the proposed mechanism. By raising magnesium levels specifically in the brain, magnesium L-threonate is enhancing GABAergic function, improving NMDA receptor regulation, supporting the neurochemical environment in which slow-wave sleep can deepen and sustain itself. It is also supporting synaptic plasticity, the brain's capacity to strengthen and reorganize its connections, which is itself dependent on adequate brain magnesium and which appears to play a role in memory consolidation during sleep. For the over 50 brain, where slow-wave sleep architecture is already beginning to thin, this targeted support for the neurochemical conditions that generate deep sleep is meaningful. Typical dosing used in research has been in the range of 1 to 2 grams of the compound, providing approximately 140 to 200 milligrams of elemental magnesium, taken approximately 1 to 2 hours before bed. APIGN-in. If magnesium L-threonate is supporting the foundation of the sleep system at a neurochemical level, apigenin is working at the receptor level to directly facilitate the transition into rest. Apigenin is a flavonoid, a plant compound. It is found in abundance in chamomile flowers and in smaller amounts in parsley, celery, artichokes, and various other plant foods. The pharmacological interest in apigenin comes from its interaction with GABA, a receptors in the brain, the same receptor family targeted by benzodiazepines and certain other prescription sleep aids. Apigenin binds to a specific site on the GABA-A receptor complex. Not the same site as benzodiazepines, which is important, but a related site, and it acts as a positive allosteric modulator. What this means is that it does not activate the receptor directly in the way that a drug like diazepam does. Instead, it enhances the receptor's sensitivity to GABA itself. When GABA is present, apigenin makes the receptor respond more strongly to it. The inhibitory effect is amplified. The neural quieting that GABA produces is more pronounced. The practical experience of this effect, which chamomile tea drinkers have known intuitively for centuries before the mechanism was understood, is a gentle, progressive calming of mental activity. Not sedation. Not the heavy, artificial suppression of consciousness that pharmaceutical sleep aids produce. A softening, a dimming of the internal noise. The racing thoughts slow down. The cognitive chatter quiets. Research has indicated that apigenin can enhance sleep quality by increasing total sleep time, reducing sleep onset latency, and improving sleep architecture. Its calming effects appear to be particularly valuable for the subset of people, which includes a significant proportion of those over 50, whose difficulty sleeping is driven not by a failure of the sleep machinery per se, but by an inability to quiet the mind enough to allow the machinery to operate. Typical dosing used in sleep support contexts has been 50 milligrams, taken about 30 to 60 minutes before bed. There is a caution worth mentioning. Apigenin has estrogenic activity. It can bind to estrogen receptors in the body. For women who have specific sensitivities around estrogenic compounds due to certain hormone-sensitive conditions, or for those taking specific hormonal medications, it is worth discussing apigenin use with a healthcare provider before beginning. This is not a common concern for most people, but it is worth naming clearly. L-theanine. If magnesium is the neurochemical foundation and apigenin is the mental quieting, L-theanine is the bridge, the connector, the compound that facilitates the state from which sleep flows most naturally. L-theanine is an amino acid found almost exclusively in the leaves of the Camellia sinensis plant. Green tea, white tea, and black tea, though in varying concentrations. And its primary mechanism of action is the promotion of alpha wave activity in the brain. Alpha waves are the electrical signature of relaxed alertness. They are the brainwave pattern associated with the eyes closed, mind-still state of someone who is at rest, but not yet drowsy. Meditators show pronounced alpha activity. The period just before the hypnagogic state, that dreamy threshold between wakefulness and sleep, is characterized by alpha waves. L-theanine promotes alpha activity by modulating glutamate and GABA neurotransmission. It inhibits the reuptake of GABA, allowing it to remain active in the synaptic space for longer, and it counteracts some of the excitatory activity of glutamate at specific receptor subtypes. The overall effect is a calming of neural noise without sedation. The brain quiets without becoming sluggish. You remain aware, but unburdened. This matters because the transition into sleep, particularly the transition into deep, quality sleep, does not happen well from a state of agitation. The brain needs to pass through this intermediate, quieted state first. And for many people over 50 who are struggling with sleep onset, it is precisely this intermediate state that proves elusive. The brain cannot find the alpha window. It oscillates between the busy beta activity of active wakefulness and the sudden, jarring transition to sleep that feels incomplete and unsatisfying. L-theanine helps create that alpha window. It broadens it, softens the edges, makes the transit from wakefulness to sleep feel more like a gentle slide than an anxious plunge. Research has also shown that L-theanine improves sleep quality, particularly the subjective sense of restfulness and the quality of recovery. Doses used in research typically range from 100 to 200 milligrams, taken 30 to 60 minutes before the desired sleep time. One important note: some people find that L-theanine, particularly at higher doses or for those who are sensitive to even mild psychoactive effects, can produce vivid dreaming. This is generally not harmful and for many people is actually enjoyable. But for those who find vivid dreams disruptive to sleep continuity, adjusting the dose downward is a simple and effective solution. On melatonin, the case for restraint. This is an important note in the context of this masterclass and the foundational understanding we have built together tonight. There is a widespread cultural habit of reaching for melatonin as a primary sleep supplement, and the intuition behind it makes sense on the surface. Melatonin levels decline with age. The pineal gland becomes less productive. Why not simply replace what has been lost? The answer is in the dose. Melatonin is not simply a sleep hormone. It is a signaling molecule, a precise, dose-sensitive, time-sensitive signal. And the concentrations at which melatonin naturally operates in the human body are vanishingly small. Physiological nighttime melatonin peaks are typically in the range of 0.05 to 0.1 nanograms per milliliter. These are tiny amounts, and they work at these tiny amounts because the melatonin receptors, MT1 and MT2, located in the SCN and throughout the body, are extraordinarily sensitive to them. The typical over-the-counter melatonin tablet contains 1 milligram, 10 milligrams. Even higher doses in some preparations. These doses produce blood levels of melatonin that are 10 to 100 times higher than the body's natural peak. And research suggests that chronically supraphysiological melatonin levels can desensitize the melatonin receptors in the SCN over time. The very receptors you are trying to support begin to down-regulate in response to the excessive stimulation. You need more to get the same effect. The natural signal gets even harder to register. If melatonin supplementation is appropriate for your specific situation, particularly in the context of jet lag, shift work adjustment, or specifically measured deficiency. Consider working with the lowest effective dose. Research on circadian phase shifting using melatonin has found that doses as low as 0.3 milligrams can be effective for timing purposes when used at the right circadian moment. The goal is to supplement the signal, not to replace it with a pharmaceutical avalanche. The three-compound stack of magnesium L-threonate, apigenin, and L-theanine approaches sleep support from a fundamentally different angle. Rather than delivering a hormone in quantities that the body wouldn't naturally produce, it works with the existing architecture of your sleep biology. It supports the GABAergic system. It promotes the neurological transition states that facilitate sleep onset. It creates the biochemical conditions in which your own melatonin signal, whatever your body is producing at this stage of your life, can do its job more effectively. Chapter 6. The 90-minute Wind Down. Your optimal life sleep protocol. We have spent this evening together traveling through some of the most fascinating and consequential biology in all of human health. We have met the master clock and understood why its signal weakens with age. We have watched the brain's glymphatic dishwasher rinse the night's metabolic debris from between your neurons. We have seen how a single, disrupted night can make your metabolism behave as though it is pre-diabetic. We have understood the temperature choreography that nature has designed to transition the body from wakefulness into deep repair. And we have looked at how to intelligently support the aging sleep system with precision tools rather than blunt instruments. Now, let's bring it all together. This is the optimal life wind-down protocol, not a rigid schedule to be followed mechanically, but a framework built from everything we have discussed tonight. A sequence that works with your biology instead of against it. Something you can adapt, personalize, and ultimately make so habitual that it becomes as automatic as breathing. It begins approximately 90 minutes before the time you intend to be asleep. 90 minutes out, the light transition. The first thing that changes at the 90-minute mark is your light environment. The overhead lights come down or go off entirely. Any remaining lighting transitions to warmer toned sources. Amber lamps, candles if that resonates with you, the red and amber end of the spectrum that has no meaningful melanopsin activating signal. The spectrum that tells your SCN nothing about daytime. The ancient light of fire that the human body is designed to recognize as the close of day. If you must use a screen in this window, and sometimes life demands it, engage your device's night mode, which shifts the display toward warmer wavelengths. Consider blue light blocking glasses with amber lenses. They are not perfect substitutes for simply putting the screens away, but they meaningfully reduce the melanopsin activating signal. This light transition is not aesthetic preference. It is the removal of the primary force that is actively suppressing your melatonin production each evening. Every minute that your melatonin is delayed, every minute that your body receives the false signal that daytime continues, is a minute of sleep, architecture that you will not recover. The onset of melatonin sets the timing of your entire sleep structure. The quality of your deep sleep, the depth of your glymphatic clearance, the calibration of your morning cortisol. All of it flows downstream from this single hormonal event. Protect it. 60 minutes out, the temperature intervention. At 60 minutes before bed, the warm shower or the warm bath. 7 to 10 minutes is sufficient. Hot enough to produce visible skin flushing, hot enough that you feel the blood rushing to your hands and feet. Then step out into your cooler bedroom environment. Let the heat dissipate. Let your core temperature begin its accelerated decline. This is your artificial sunset. This is how you recreate, in the context of a modern climate-controlled home, the experience that your biology was designed to respond to. The evening cooling of the natural world. The signal that has always told the mammalian brain the active phase is ending, the repair phase is beginning. While you are showering or bathing, this can also be a deliberate transition for the mind. Let the water take the day. Let the heat draw the tension out of the muscles. This is not simply a physical preparation. It is an invitation to the nervous system to begin shifting modes. From the sympathetic activation of daytime demands toward the parasympathetic calm in which sleep operates. 30 minutes out, the supplement window and the brain dump. 30 minutes before you intend to be asleep is when the supplement stack is taken. Magnesium L-threonate, 1 to 2 grams. The brain-permeable form that will begin elevating magnesium in the neural tissue over the coming days and weeks of consistent use, and which in the short term supports GABAergic tone. Apigenin at 50 milligrams binding to the GABA-A receptor complex and gently amplifying the inhibitory signal that quiets neural noise. And L-theanine at 100 to 200 milligrams, promoting the alpha wave state from which sleep flows naturally. Take these with a small amount of water, not a large meal. The digestive activity of a large meal competes with the processes you are trying to facilitate in this same 30-minute window, and this is something that is worth treating seriously despite feeling mundane, is what is sometimes called the brain dump. Your brain, in the hour before sleep, is not reliably capable of simply letting go of the day's unfinished cognitive threads. The prefrontal cortex, the region responsible for planning, problem-solving, and the management of tasks, is still active. It is still running background processes. And these processes, when allowed to continue into the sleep onset period, are one of the primary drivers of the lying awake with racing thoughts experience that so many people over 50 know intimately. The brain dump is simple. Take a notebook, not a phone, not a digital device, and spend 5 to 10 minutes writing. Write down everything that is unfinished, everything that needs to happen tomorrow, every item your mind keeps returning to, every problem that doesn't yet have a solution. Get it out of your head and onto paper. Research on this practice, including a study from Baylor University published in the Journal of Experimental Psychology, found that spending 5 minutes writing a specific, concrete to-do list before bed significantly reduced the time it took participants to fall asleep, compared to writing about completed tasks. The mechanism is intuitive once you understand it. The brain returns repeatedly to unfinished tasks, a cognitive phenomenon known as the Zeigarnik effect, because it is trying to hold them open to ensure they are not forgotten. When you externalize them onto paper, when the brain has a physical record outside of itself, it can release the holding. The open loops close, the background processing quiets, and the transition into sleep becomes markedly smoother. The final 10 minutes: position, temperature, and intention. As you prepare to lie down, consider the positional element we discussed in the glymphatic chapter. If you are not a habitual side sleeper, try the lateral position tonight. Rest on your side. Allow the architecture of the glymphatic system to work with you, rather than against you. Your bedroom should be cool, 60 to 67 degrees for most adults in this age range. Dark as you can make it, because even low levels of light exposure during sleep have been shown to affect sleep quality and the melatonin signal. And quiet, or masked with consistent background sound if your environment has intrusive noise. And in those last minutes before sleep claims you, there is a practice that is simpler than any protocol and perhaps more powerful than any supplement. Breathe. Specifically, extend the exhalation. Breathe in for 4 counts. Breathe out for 6, or breathe in for 4, hold for 2, breathe out for 6 to 8. The precise ratio matters less than the principle. The extended exhalation activates the vagal nerve, slows the heart rate, and shifts the nervous system decisively toward parasympathetic dominance. The cortisol that may still be slightly elevated from the day begins to fall. The adenosine that has been accumulating in your brain all day, that sleep pressure molecule that makes you feel increasingly tired as the hours of wakefulness accumulate, can finally do its work unopposed. And as you breathe, let the information of this evening settle into the body rather than just the mind. Because what we have explored tonight is not just intellectual content. It is the biology of your own restoration. You are not a machine that simply powers down at night. You are an organism of extraordinary complexity and precision, engaged in a nightly process of reconstruction that makes everything the next day possible. Every hour of deep sleep you protect. Tonight is an investment in the clarity of your thinking tomorrow morning, the stability of your blood sugar, the health of the neurons that carry your memories and your sense of self, and the repair of the tissues that keep the body functioning for decades to come. The Circadian Code is not a secret. It is not a hack. It is not something that requires extraordinary resources or unusual discipline. It is simply the native language of your biology, a language that the modern world has taught us to ignore and that we are capable of learning to speak again. You now know what the master clock needs. You now understand what the glymphatic system is doing while you sleep. You know why your metabolism is protected or compromised by the quality of your rest. You know how temperature signals the body toward deep repair, and you know how to support the aging sleep system with precision rather than brute force. This is the optimal life, not perfection, but alignment, working with the design rather than against it, one night at a time. If tonight's masterclass gave you something valuable, something that changes how you will approach sleep going forward, please share it with someone who needs it. Leave a comment below and let us know which part of the science landed most powerfully for you. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, so that every new deep dive in the After Dark series finds its way to you. And take care of your sleep, because your sleep is taking care of you. Good night.